Okay, so with respect to everyone's time, we'll get started. It's a minute after, and those can still join us. So welcome to our Hacktober Cybersecurity Webinar. For those that haven't met me, I am Penny Balluz. I'm the Director of Operations for Teleco. And with us this morning, we also have Michael Crean with Solutions Granted, and also Ryan Gagnon with Jones & Associates Insurance. Michael Crean with Solutions Granted is one of our partners who we work closely with to reinforce and secure our cybersecurity stack with our clients from hackers and breaches. And Michael comes to us with as a 20-year veteran of the channel and also the CEO of Solutions Granted. And much like us, he believes in education and a practical approach to cybersecurity, which is really also what we're all about here at Teleco too. As a local business ourselves in our community, we want to lead by example in the cyberspace and provide education, training, and knowledge to ensure that all businesses continue to thrive as cybercrime becomes more and more prevalent. Also, I'd like to welcome Ryan Gagnon. Ryan is a commercial account manager with a specialty in cybersecurity insurance. Cybersecurity is really a layered approach, and Ryan will share with us how the cyber insurance market has really become a critical requirement for enterprise risk management. So between the three of us, our goal is to keep this webinar informative and interactive. We really don't want to just talk to you for an hour, so we're going to keep our presentations fairly short in 10 to 12 minutes and open it up to questions. So please feel free to put any questions in the chat, and we can either answer them after each of us are done, or we can answer them all at the end of the presentation. And by all means, if you have a question and you think of it after, you can definitely reach out to me and I'd be happy to get back to you. So for those who don't know, myself or Teleco, we are a local technology company. We basically integrate technology. First, when we started in 1985, we were a structured data cabling company and an on-prem telephony company. And that has since grown and evolved to being a hosted cloud telephony provider, as well as IT services specializing in cybersecurity. And we also do security and monitoring and surveillance. So really it has anything to do with technology that will benefit your business. But today for Cybersecurity Awareness Month, we want to talk about cybersecurity. It's really important for us to bring that to our community because we hear about it happening and it is happening here local. So what really is, cybersecurity? Well, it's important to know that the definition of cybersecurity is really not just the technology aspect of it. It's important to understand that it's also your people. It's the human operating system of your organization that's just as important as your technology stack and your processes. You can almost compare it to an alarm system for your business. You can buy a state-of-the-art alarm system, but if you don't train your employees at the end of their shift to turn it on at night, it simply is not going to work for you. So it's really a layered approach to involve the people who work for you, your processes, and also the technology that can really all work together as part of your cybersecurity strategy and your program to really build a solid foundation to protect your business and your organization. And with cybersecurity, we hear a lot about, the dark web. And really, what is the dark web? We hear about it and it sounds really bad, but do you actually know what the dark web is? And the dark web is really part of the internet that you can't just Google. You can't just stumble across the dark web by accident. If you get to the dark web, you know what you're doing. You've invested energy. You need a special browser to access it. It's not something that you're just going to get there by accident, or your employees are going to get there by accident. So it's important for you to know, what the dark web is and how it can impact your business. And this is probably my favorite slide in doing presentations, because a lot of people don't realize, that the internet is large and huge, but you don't really realize the portion of it that we actually use today. So I just wanted to touch on, the surface web, which is really what we use every single day in our interactions, whether it's our banking, our social media, going to websites, shopping, streaming video. That's all the surface web. And really that is only less than 10% of the visible surface layer of the internet. Below that, if you like it to an iceberg, anything below the water is considered the deep web and then eventually the dark web. So the deep web is really a portion of the internet that you can't just get to it. It's could be government information, security files, legal files, medical documents, or even blogs for websites that aren't yet published to the internet. Those are all in the deep web. And then below that is the dark web. And the dark web is really less than 5% of the internet. So it's not indexed. It's only accessible with a special web browser. And there really are three things that the dark web offers. One is user anonymity. It's virtually untraceable for services and to access the sites. And it gives the ability to take illegal action for people and providers. So it's not really getting to the dark web that's illegal. It's really what you do on the dark web. And part of that are credentials, login credentials, password credentials, information about you. Those sorts of credentials are available on the dark web for sale. So an important question to ask yourself is, do you think that your credentials or possibly your employees' credentials are available for sale on the dark web to buy right now? And I can tell you, were too many people who had registered for the webinar, but I was able to log on and I picked the first 5 companies that registered for the webinar and ran dark web scans on them, just to give you a very good example of what's out there. And those first 5 companies, not to give out any names, but there definitely were credentials available for sale on the dark web today. And that's 5 local companies in Thunder Bay where I could go on right now and purchase those credentials. So company number 1 had 20 unique email IDs available for sale. Company number 2 had 30. Company number 3 had 6. Company number 4 had 11. And company number 5 had 3. And some of those emails had multiple breaches. So even though there may be 20 unique emails, that one email address could have had 10 different possible breaches available for purchase. So that information is definitely out there. And it's important for you to be aware that once those credentials are available on the dark web, that they can't be removed. They can't be removed and they can't be deleted. But once you know that they're there, you can at least take action to protect yourself and protect your business. You can approach that employee and say, hey, this credential is available on the dark web. Please ensure that this password isn't used for anything else within our organization, and make sure you're following our password policy that everything has to be strong and unique. So I wanted to share also, it's even credentials are out there for Teleco. So this is an example of a report on our credentials that are currently available on the dark web. And most of these employees currently no longer work for Teleco. They're old employees that haven't worked here for a while, but you can see near the bottom of the list that I'm on there. So there is a credential breach of somewhere where I've used my email address, and it shows that my password started with MAXX. And I can tell you that that at one time would have been accurate because that is my dog's name. Everything they tell you that you should not do with password security is use your dog's name. But I've been working here for 25 years. And at one time I used my dog's name as a password. And that was before we got into cybersecurity and did employee training and learned that that's not a best practice for passwords. So you are going to get these credentials and these reports, and at least you can report back to that employee to say, hey, this is your password, please make sure that you definitely change that. Also, if anyone is interested, if it was your company that got scanned on the dark web, don't hesitate to reach out to me and I can share that information with you as well. So the dark web, this information that's out there, how does this relate to cybercrime? Well, cybercrime is now larger than all other forms of organized crime combined. It's the world's biggest criminal growth industry. The last stat that I read from Cybercrime magazine reported that cybercrime is going to cost the world $10.5 trillion by 2025. So it's more profitable than the global trade of all major illegal drugs combined. So no one is going to be immune to the attention of cyber criminals who will target any size of business, any type of business, and any location. So we are a target here in our community. It's never been more important to protect yourself and your business and your customers from cybercrime. And one of the big questions I get when speaking with people, or even just talking to some of our clients, is, well, I'm just a small business. Like, why should I care? Like, are they really interested in what I have? And the reality is that as business owners or IT professionals or C-level executives, we are all responsible for establishing and growing a business and organization. And this means oftentimes we wear many different hats. And because of that, a mistake some small businesses can make for sure is overlooking the security function. And the reality is that these cyber criminals don't discriminate by the size of your business. And unfortunately, the aftermath of an attack can really devastate a corporation or a business. And we should also care because we also have an obligation to protect individuals' information that we're collecting. And every business collects different sort of information. But in Canada, we do have the PIPEDA Act, which is the Personal Information Protection and Electronic Documents Act. And that really means that we have an obligation that when we are collecting personal information, and that could be any factual information such as age, your name, your income, maybe your blood type, your social status, employee files, medical records, credit records, financial records. If you're storing any type of that personal information, then you have a responsibility to protect that. Businesses that do come under a cyber attack, there's lots of things that will impact them. Operational disruption. What would happen if I couldn't access my quoting tool or my invoicing tool or my account files? How long can my business go without access to any data on our network? How can your business continue to operate? How will it affect your reputation? If people found out that there is a breach and I've had to let all of my clients know that their record information has been out there, how is that now going to affect my reputation? Will my clients and my customers and even my suppliers feel confident leaving their information with me? And also one of the worst outcomes of a cyber attack is that sudden drop in revenue, which either could result as customers wanting to go elsewhere, or because I had to pay money to a hacker because I've been extorted, as one of their victims. And also businesses have to be aware that a company's product design, their technology, maybe their go-to-market strategy, or any valuable asset that I have as an independent business owner could be stolen and then shared. So those are all very, things that need to be considered. And you are a target, often, especially for small business, you may lack funds or you don't prioritize your cybersecurity plan, or you lack the resources. You don't have the luxury of having a full-time dedicated IT department that can just look after security. Or you have aging equipment and unpatched devices. It seemed like it was more important to put it into a marketing campaign than into an old computer that I've been using. Lack of training. I don't have the ability or the funds to put together a cybersecurity training program for my staff. Oftentimes, smaller businesses may lack policies. You don't have a working at home policy. Or if you found a jump drive in the parking lot, can I bring that and plug it into my computer on our network? And also the reality is that small business and medium business is the link to big fish. In today's world, businesses are all digitally connected. And to each other, there's transactions, there's supply chain, we share information. And so what's happening is that cyber criminals are recognizing that it may be harder to penetrate that larger organization, but it's easier to penetrate that small business and then link themselves into that larger organization. So unfortunately, we as a small business can be the link to a bigger fish. And it's happening in our community more than you think. Often, prior to COVID, when we were able to do these presentations in person, people would come back to me and talk after to say, hey, you know what, I didn't really want to say anything, but we actually had a ransom attack and a breach. And this is what happened to me. I lost my network for a couple of days. It was a nightmare. And so more and more people are starting to talk about it. So it is happening here. But why don't we hear about it more often? Oftentimes, in the news, it's just not net newsworthy. So we don't hear about it being reported. Sometimes businesses are a little bit embarrassed to share that information. And, they don't want people to know that there was a vulnerability on the network and some information, did get out. And so it's just not great PR, to have clients know that. And often too, I hear people say, well, I didn't want to say anything because I didn't really know what my legal requirements were. Do I need to tell my clients? I wasn't really sure, so I just didn't say anything. So oftentimes these small cyber attacks or even larger cyber attacks aren't talked about, but they're definitely happening. So I didn't want to include a ton of stats and facts, but I did want to include just a couple regarding in Canada, because we hear a lot about stuff that's happening in the States, but it's definitely happening here in our own backyard. In Canada, 43% of recent cyber attacks were directly targeted toward SMB, towards that small, medium business size. And 80% of the Canadian organizations were targeted by phishing. So phishing was the most common type of cybercrime in Canada by quite a considerable margin. So 45% of organizations were targeted. And also Ontario in itself had most cybercrime incidents than all of the Canadian provinces. And that doesn't really come as a surprise because in Ontario, we are one of the more developed provinces and also one of the most populous. So it's definitely going to be more prevalent. So how is this happening? How are these threat actors, these cyber criminals, how are they able to achieve this? And it's through phishing attacks and social engineering. So if you haven't heard of the term social engineering really just plays on our emotions as human people to want to help each other. It tricks us. Social engineering may use different types, but the most common one is phishing. And phishing, which you've all, I'm sure, been a part of, is a fraudulent attempt to obtain some sort of sensitive information from you, possibly your password, your username, credit card information, some sort of information about you. And it's one of the easiest ways or forms of a cyber attack for a criminal to carry out. And it's usually carried out over the email, but you can also get it through SMS, through texting. And what we saw is with COVID-19, it really went through the roof. And it's unfortunate that cyber criminals will go after adverse situation, but they recognize that people were feeling vulnerable. And with vulnerability comes the basically a way for them to exploit the pandemic and feed off our fears and feed off of our uncertainties. So it definitely increased with COVID-19 by feeding off our vulnerabilities. And also we sent people home to work. So now all of a sudden we took people out of a business environment. And if you were fortunate to have an IT department that could look after your network, you now sent people home to work that may not have all those security features in place. So it definitely opened it up for cyber criminals to be a lot more lucrative as us as local businesses had to, pivot and, basically deal with the COVID-19 closures and send people home and try to stay operational. So with COVID-19, it actually drove phishing emails up 667%, which is huge. So, basically it just opened up the doors for cyber criminals to have a heyday on businesses, and it was very lucrative for them. So what can you do? One of the most important things that we wanted you to take away from this webinar is to actually have things that you can do today to help protect yourself. So as cybercrime continues to rise, it's increasingly apparent that you need to look after your cybersecurity strategy. So we do have a web page that you can go to. We set it up for Cybersecurity Awareness Month, and then we're going to be leaving it up there. And we have tons of documents that you can download. And one resource is 15 ways to protect your business from a cyber attack. And you may not have all 15 of these covered, but at least you can download this as a checklist to either talk to your IT department or your MSP that you're dealing with to say, hey, you know what, I just would like to know where we are on our cybersecurity journey. Can you go through this checklist with me? And you may be down here at number 1, or you could be all the way here at 15. But at least it gives you a way to start the conversation and pick out what's important for your organization to make sure that you have a strategic plan in place. And there's a few other checklists you may find handy in there, and also a couple of videos as well about how easy it is to be a target and how easy it is to go on the dark web and get those credentials on your employees. So the other thing that you can do is make sure you back up your data. It doesn't matter, no matter how you choose to back up your data, you may choose to do it in a cloud or send it to an offsite management facility. The main thing is that you're doing it and that you're also testing it frequently. There's nothing worse than being in a situation where you've lost your data and you need to restore it and you haven't tested, or you find out that it wasn't saved in complete capacity, or find out that it doesn't work. So you want to proactively make sure you're backing it up and that you're also testing it. You also can set up your computers to automatically block access to known malicious websites. So you can proactively stop your employees from going to malicious websites that you may not want them to be in. Train your employees, invest in security awareness training. We know that 95% of cybersecurity breaches are from human error. So train your humans. It's proven that with training through either webinars, online training, fake phishing simulators, by doing that, you can train your employees in a safe area of what not to click on and how to spot a phishing email. Here's an example quickly I just wanted to share of some tips that you can do to spot a phishing email. You can check the sender from and look at the address to make sure the address is correct. Cyber criminals can get really tricky. I've seen some from our email domains are teleco.ca, and instead of the L, it's a capital I. So you really need to check, to make sure that that sender from is the proper address. Look for bad or very poor grammar. Be very skeptical if the email stresses urgency, like you need to do this right away. Click on this link immediately to verify it's you. Don't be tricked by that. And be very careful if the email is asking you for personal or confidential information. When in doubt, delete it, go to the website directly. And you can also check the link. So if a link is provided, you can hover your mouse over the link and see if it looks suspicious. This next one was one that I actually got sent myself, and it's a really great example of social engineering, preying on the fact that, when COVID first started, we were an essential service, we were still working. I was having a very hard time finding hand sanitizer, finding masks for our technicians to wear. And so when I got this text to my phone, honestly, my first thought was, oh, thank goodness, the Red Cross is handing out masks. I can get some for our technicians. And I was actually driving looking for hand sanitizer from store to store for the text when I got this text to my phone. And, it wasn't until I actually stopped and took a look at it and realized, this doesn't seem right. And I called the Red Cross, asked them, they said, nope, that's going around. It's definitely not true. It's malicious. Don't click on that link. And thank goodness I had the training to recognize that and not be fooled. But I have to tell you, when I first saw it, my first reaction was, oh, thank God, I can get some masks for my technicians. So it's a very good example of social engineering. We also recommend password management. A strong password can make the difference between a hacked computer and a safe company. So passwords are a really big deal. Using simple passwords leaves your company vulnerable, and a password manager will help you create strong, secure passwords and remember them for you. And use 2FA on all applications that offer them. It's important to ensure your Wi-Fi networks are secure and encrypted. You should also ensure that the Wi-Fi password is only given to employees. It should not be shared with anyone outside your business team, and remind your employees of the danger of sharing passwords in an office environment. And lastly, keep those computers updated. An antivirus program from 2007 is unlikely to follow any full protection, and keep your computer safe. It's always good practice to run your antivirus program on all company computers at regular intervals. Keep other software up to date is so important, and ensure your antivirus is running and up to date, and be safe for everyone. So that's the end of my presentation. Really, we want you to stay cyber strong. We want you to understand that, yes, the technology is super important, but also the culture of your employees is important too. Train them, make them knowledgeable, make them a part of your cybersecurity strategy. So next, I'd like to welcome Michael, who's really going to give us a great look at what's happening in the cybersecurity industry and what he's seeing on his end. So I'll share the presentation with you, Michael.
Right on. So we had one question that came in, Penny, and it was somebody that was asking and had a comment on Google data breaches. Said, I've changed my password to strong and unique and used a random password generator, but the data breaches continue. Criminals are crafty. It's really not something that's going to be that simple. And Penny actually brought it up in her presentation using two-factor. It is something that you can integrate with Google. I've personally done it on mine. I know that I've recommended it to all my employees, anybody that's willing to hear me run my mouth. But if you really want to get to that point where you're securing it, use two-factor, and it's free. You can send it to a text message to the phone, and that's really good, not the best. But Google Authenticator is free, and you can integrate that with your Google account. And that becomes incredibly, nothing's impenetrable, but good luck.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and we made it a policy here, and I actually lived the policy first. So when we decided many years ago that a password manager policy is something that all employees are going to have to abide to, as well as two-factor authentication. And it's that whole trade-off of convenience for security. And that's probably the biggest pushback we get from clients is like, well, that's going to take an extra minute, or that's going to take extra time, and I don't want to do that. But it's that, you take that extra step to be that much more secure. And before I was going to make all of our employees do it, I thought I have to live and breathe this myself and see exactly what that convenience to security balance is. And honestly, it has made a world of difference, and actually has made it easier for all of us, to make sure that we are securing all those passwords. They are all unique. The 2FA comes on. And like Michael said, in most cases, depending on what software you're using, it's free. So there's no reason why you can't turn that on and slowly start migrating to every 2FA possible option that you can. So that's a wonderful question.
That was a great question.
Okay, so Michael, do you want to, I'll stop share if you want to.
Yes, ma'am. All right, so hopefully everybody can see my screen.
Mm-hmm.
Right on. Well, I appreciated this opportunity to speak to you guys and gals today. I'm not going to take a lot of your time, but my name is Michael Crane. I am the CEO and founder of Solutions Granted. We have partnered with Teleco as a managed security services provider. This is all we do. We don't do anything. Please don't call us because you can't print, because that's not a security issue. Please don't call me because you forgot your password, because that might be an issue, but it's not a security issue, because if you forgot it, maybe the bad guy won't get it either. We are here to chase those things that go bump on the net, and to be awake 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, monitoring and looking after and staying educated on that threat landscape and what is happening out there. So let me see here. I like to start with something called the security responsibility. What I did is I went out and I looked at Google and I typed in the word responsibility, and I got 3 great definitions that came back from it. One is the state or fact of having a duty to deal with something. It is my opinion and belief we all have the responsibility to deal with cybersecurity. It is not just about my team of professionals. It is not just about the education that Penny and her team brings to you. It's also about your action and your day-to-day interactions with the computer. And if it doesn't look right, it's probably not right. Be cautious and be careful. If we're all doing this together, that responsibility is going to make it much easier. The second definition came back saying, basically, it's the accountability to blame for something. If we were all in a room together, I'd ask everybody to raise their hand if they've ever been blamed for something that they didn't even know they were accountable for. And typically we all raise our hands because we all know we've been blamed and we didn't even know we were the responsible party. When it comes to cybersecurity, we are all accountable. It isn't about the technology that lets us down. It isn't about the bad programming. It starts with the user that's accepting something or clicking on something or just carelessly moving along in their day and not putting thought and effort to it. So we all have to be responsible together. The third definition, which I personally really much like this one, and so does my 13-year-old daughter, it's that opportunity or ability to act independently and make decisions without authorization. Yes, every day she is making bad decisions without authorization, and she should probably stop doing that because she finds herself in trouble more often than not. I think we're like on a day on, day off on whether she's grounded or not grounded based on her independent thinking and decisions without authorization. But it's that type of responsibility that we as a service provider are looking for our partners, Teleco, to believe in us so that we can be responsible and act independently and make those really good decisions without authorization. And it's why you would work with Teleco, because you want them to be responsible. You want them to act independently. You don't have time to micromanage them. And so that security responsibility is something we all have to practice together. But if we look at how we could break this word down, we'll break it down into two pieces. One is respond, and the other one is ability. So you look at a firefighter, and they have different phases in their life. And we look at our job very much like a firefighter. When there's a fire in your house, you don't want them knocking on the door gently. You don't want them waiting to see if you're going to allow them to come in. You want them to come in and put that fire out with extreme prejudice. You want them to be careful. You don't want them to do unnecessary damage, but you certainly want that destructive event to stop. They have to have the ability to do something, but they also have to have the courage to respond. Having the ability and not choosing to respond is terrible. Wanting to respond and not having the ability is also just as bad. So when you're thinking about your security posture, think about your ability. Think about the training that you've gone through. Think about your responsibility to respond. And then we'll all start to do something a little bit different than just pointing the finger at one another and figuring out who was the responsible party for how something failed. We've heard it, we've seen it. The average ransomware payout has gone up significantly. If you look at the cost from just a short, what now is 3 years ago, it was $10,000 in the average ransomware payout. In Q4 of last year, it went up to $233,000. It's a cool $250,000. I don't know about you, but I don't have a $250,000 that I'd like to spend for somebody stealing my data just so that I could pay it to get it back. It's like somebody walks into your house, they take your TV, they stand on the other side of the street, and there's this invisible barrier that you can't walk over there, do whatever you want to get it back, but the only way you're going to get your TV back is to pay for it. And that TV now costs you $250,000. It's yours. Protect it. Think about it. Don't allow what has become the norm to become a potential life-ending event for you and your business. We've all seen it. You know, Penny talked about this earlier, the Colonial Pipeline. Now, I live on the East Coast of the United States in Virginia, not too far from Washington, D.C. This affected us. And it affected me in a way that I had never seen anything like this before. My employees and I one night were going to a Washington Capitals hockey game, and there's a gas station not even a quarter of a mile down the road from us. Everything seems fine. We leave, we go to the game, we have a great time, we come back, I drop everybody off at their car. There is a line a quarter of a mile long going down the road. People panicked to get gas because there's no more gas flowing. This is what I've considered a gross negligence moment. The Colonial Pipeline could have stopped this. They did not have two-factor authentication on their VPN getting into their office. Worse yet, this was an ex-employee that had not been there for a significant period of time. So think about it. People panicked. They couldn't get gas. Gas prices went up and they did not come back down. Shocker. It's amazing how capitalism works that way. But we really struggled with this, and this was all defendable. This was not a moment in time that it had to happen, and it's not something that hasn't been talked about for the last decade. So when you think about how maybe that was a frustrating moment for you, think about your client's data and what you can do to protect yourself so that it doesn't affect them. What is the goal of security? Well, the goal of security is to stop things. And just like a lock on your house or an alarm or a smoke detector, it is to give you an early indicator to a problem. It's to stop the incident from happening before it becomes too financially impactful. So we've done a lot of market research. We've looked at a lot of what we're doing as an organization. And obviously, my mom calls me Captain Obvious occasionally. She said to me, well, if you stop it the moment it happens, it doesn't cost anything. Yes, Mom, you are correct. And that is the truth. If we stop it when it happens, it costs nothing. Unfortunately, the reality shows in the latest IBM security report that the average breach now goes on for about 200 days. So we looked at this and said, okay, well, what happens if it only goes on for 100 days? It's not even ransomware. It's how this financially impacts your organization to the tune of about $200,000. It is damaged reputation. It is lost clients. It is downtime that you've experienced. It is employees that have a psychologically, emotionally impacting, frustrating, well, I don't want to work here anymore. This was too hard on me. I can't work with an organization where I had to work 18 hours a day to recover, but they were doing the right thing to recover. So it isn't just about the money out that comes out of your pocket, and it's a lot. How many of you have more than $200,000 in cybersecurity insurance? Not a lot of people that I see today. You can get it. You've got to do the right things, but you want to make sure you have the right insurance. So if the bad day comes, because it can, you could do everything right. And if you are a target of opportunity because somebody seeks you out, they're going to get you, but you have to detect it in a timely manner so that it doesn't become a $200,000 event. I don't have another $200,000 on top of the $250,000 that somebody was trying to give away earlier. That's just not coming out of my pocket. So we talk about some basic security fundamentals and getting them right. Now, when I say this, this isn't the basic security fundamentals like Penny was talking about that are the basics of everybody should be doing: the patch management, the two-factor authentication, having good credentialing, using complex passwords, not downloading things just because and clicking on things because. We're talking about where the new modern office is and why things are changing. If we go back 5 years ago, 10 years ago, and people had an on-prem Exchange server, well, we all had some sort of email security around it. We knew that people were attacking us and they were sending the spam. Well, it's changed. We've moved it out to Microsoft, we've moved it out to Google, and now we're thinking they've got it. Well, if you really look at it in their base packages, they don't have it. It's not what they've told us, but we just assumed. So you have to continue to add that level of security, and don't think about it like this cloud application. Think about it like it's an endpoint. We all have a really good idea how to defend our homes with locks or a very large dog. I happen to have one of those. Maybe you like a baseball bat. Maybe you like your phone just to call 911, or you've got a panic button that calls 911 for you. But all of these things in defending our homes, we treat it like an endpoint. We know what to do when it comes to our workstations and our servers. Think about what you're doing in Microsoft and 365 or G Suite and monitor the logs. Add an email security component to it. Make sure, and Penny talked about this, having the antivirus from 10 years ago or 5 years ago, it's not keeping up with today's threat landscape. You have to have something, and I hate the term, but it's accurate, next generation. It feels like you're going to the monster truck rally and all you're hearing is Sunday, Sunday, Sunday. Next gen isn't just a term. It really does mean that it is the next evolution of what's happening in antivirus and how we use something that's different than a signature. You have to continue to move. This is a change or be changed moment. And if we're not willing to change, thank you, Blockbuster. Look at Netflix today. They were unwilling to change and see where they're at today. They're out of business and Netflix is thriving. Change for the sake of things that make sense to you and getting some of those new basic security fundamentals right. Penny called it earlier. It's phishing. Email is the number one threat. It has been the number one threat. Some people are really concerned about malware. Well, 94% of malware gets delivered through email. That's a big number. So if you could stop something at the email before it gets to the endpoint, how much more effective can your endpoint solution be? How much more effective can your antivirus be? How much more effective can Teleco be in finding the problem and collaborating with us when we're not defending as much because we're putting effective policies in place that stop it where it's coming from? 50% of breaches involve phishing. That's a big number. Microsoft doesn't have it. If Microsoft had it, they wouldn't have added something called ATP. They added it because they knew that they were failing miserably and the threat landscape changed. It used to be spam was our problem. I know that I don't need a Russian bride. My wife might not be happy with me about that. I know that I don't need the little blue pill. And I certainly know that I do not have a Nigerian uncle that has left me millions of dollars in his closet. Those type of things are not real. Now they've gotten far craftier, they've gotten better, and they're really good at trying to get us to click on it and think about it. But I am certain, and Penny, you could probably help me out here. Penny, are you ever going to send your clients an email saying, hey, we need your username and password because we think there's something going on?
Never.
Yeah. So don't fall for it. Your bank's not going to do it. The United States, the Social Security Administration is not going to do it. Look, I have a personal mission when they call me and they try to get me on the phone and tell me that I'm going to jail because my Social Security number has been expired. If I can keep on the phone for 30 minutes, I feel like I've had a really good day of wasting somebody's time, and it stops them from actually getting to somebody else. Don't fall for it. And also, if you have the education, if you have the experience, share it with your family. Don't hoard it. People say that knowledge is power. I don't believe that to be true. I think the action of knowledge becomes power. So don't hold it. You're hearing great things today. Go back to your teams and share it. Go back to your families and share it. Go back to your elderly parents and share it. Help them because they are being targeted, and we all become much stronger together. It's not just mail. Think about how you're using 365 today. You're using it for OneDrive. You're using it for SharePoint. You're using it for Teams for that collaboration. So we have to be considered. Again, it's an endpoint. It's not just a cloud application. Think about it like an endpoint and securing it like an endpoint, and we will all become more safe and secure together. And Microsoft doesn't have it. Google doesn't have it. We have a responsibility for doing it for ourselves and becoming a better, tighter, stronger, faster community that has the responsibility because we do have that ability and we can respond in our own ways. So one thing that I like to leave people with are some simple, easy actions that you can take. I love this organization, the CIS. They have got these fantastic controls in place, and they've got 18 of them. It used to be 20. I think they've broken it down to 18, but I love the top 6. These are the most impactful actions out there. It's the inventory and control of your hardware assets. Just because your employee says, my job would be so much easier if you'd let me bring in my home computer, or you'd let me bring in my memory stick, or you'd let me bring in my printer, or you'd let me bring in my wireless access point, that then allows me to seamlessly roam through the office. Don't do it. That's not controlling the hardware assets. Here's what you wouldn't let happen. My buddy John, who lives next door to me, wants to come over and watch the game on Sunday, but he asked if he could bring his couch over and put it in my house to watch the game. Why would I do that? Nobody would do that. Don't let your employees, don't let your vendors just randomly bring things into the environment, because that leaves you with a lack of control. The same thing with software. Don't just install it because it sounds good, it looks good, it feels good, or you think, look at it for what it brings into the environment. It adds another point of vulnerability. Vulnerability management. Vulnerability management kind of go hand in hand with patch management. Penny said it earlier. She talked about the fact of keeping your systems up to date. Of the breaches that we see and the vulnerabilities that get exploited and the incidences that we respond to, most of them come from phishing, but we're starting to see many, many more that are happening because people are not patching their systems. And I'm not talking about just the things that Teleco is responsible for. Think about the third-party vendors that you've brought in, that you've allowed them to put something in your environment because they need it for whatever HVAC control or whatever it may be. Make sure they're giving you a plan. Hold them accountable. Make sure that they're doing the right things. Here's one that everybody gets frustrated about. And here's the last point I'll talk on this 6. Administrative privileges. When Penny's team tells you you cannot have admin access through your everyday user account, please don't fight. Please don't argue. Please don't fuss. It's just the right thing to do. I understand that it's not convenient. 2 weeks ago, an MSP had a partner client of theirs who got compromised. The CIO of that organization had his user account as a domain admin. His credentials were compromised, and they got onto the domain controller in that environment, and they started stealing patient information, health information, because the CIO said, I have to have administrative control because I have to do my job. You could have two sets of credentials. One is a user every day, one is a set of administrators. This is critically important. And it's unfortunate that we're still talking about this today because Microsoft has been talking about this for more than a decade. It's not convenient, it's not easy, but the hardest things in life are the things that pay out the most. If you can start working on these, and if you can start doing these 6 things, CIS says that you can reduce the threats by 85%. That's a big number. Now, look, we'd all like to think that we do everything perfect and we get 100%. Perfection doesn't exist. Chastening is in a maddening situation. You're never going to get there. I think that's the secondary definition that I'd like to add to Einstein's theory of insanity. Doing the same thing over and over again, expecting a different result was number 1. Chasing perfection, I think, should be number 2. You can't get there. There is no such thing as perfect. Do the best that you can. And by implementing some of these, you can really reduce your threats by a lot. So why did Penny and team decide to partner with us? Well, it's not for my magnetic personality or my charming good looks. Now, my 10-year-old would say that that's not true because that's my man right there. He is the hype man of all hype mans for me and my life. He can tell you every reason why I am the best, but that's not going to get the job done while we're here. We have been a CRN Security 100 for 3 years now. We have been a global top 250 managed security services provider for 4 years. I've only got 3 up there, but the slide's getting a little crowded, so I didn't want to put it out there. The next gen antivirus that we use comes from a company by the name of Cylance, and we are the largest MSSP in the world with Cylance. We have roughly 250,000 devices that we are managing and are co-managing or watching with our MSP partners, just like Teleco. So she didn't pick me for my jokes. She didn't pick me for my magnetic personality. They picked us because we're good at what we do and we take our responsibility serious. I really appreciate everybody's opportunity today. Thank you for spending a few minutes with me. Hopefully there's been something in here that has meant something to you. And if there's any questions, I'd be more than happy to answer them.
Great, thanks, Michael. One thing you mentioned, which is also so important, is when you train your employees and your team, they do take that back to their family. And that became evident even in my own family when there was an iTunes hack going on where kids or anybody was getting texted that their iTunes account got hacked and that they had to put in some information, and they were trying to get kids to rebuy them back on credit card. And thankfully, we talk about it so much in our household that my kids right away knew that that was it was false. And in their group of friends said, don't click on that, whatever. And they came back and we were sitting around the dining room table. And unfortunately, my husband's niece fell prey to that and lost a couple $100. And so that's how we started talking about it. My son goes, oh yeah, I got that. And his other friend got it. And I told them though, that was all fake and not to click on it, Mom. And I was like, oh, that's so awesome. It made my day. But so, it's so important that, these skills of learning this, don't only just apply to your business, but it also applies to your personal life too. So that's definitely a very great point. I do have a question that came to me, but I think it can wait to the end and we can go to Ryan. Thank you,
Perfect.
Michael.
Thank you.
Excellent. So perfect. Can everyone see my slide there?
You bet.
Excellent. Okay, so I'm going to try to keep this somewhat brief because I definitely want to open it up for some questions from everyone, because I think that's where we'll get some more value for sure out of this, because there was some really great information there. I think 2 things I want to definitely touch on right away from that Penny and Michael both said. The cyber insurance part of it is definitely a safety net. We are seeing 100% more sophistication in attacks now. And like Michael said, the costs have been skyrocketing on, whether it's ransom attacks, whether it's the cost to, look at the data, look at the information. So those are 2 definite big points I want you to take out of this. And think of the insurance policy as a safety net. We don't want to be in a situation where you need the policy. So that's why all these checks and balances and the things that Teleco offers are a huge part of, avoiding being in a claim situation. So like Penny said, so I'm a commercial account manager here at Jones. I've been in the industry now for about 5 years. when I first started, cyber was there, but it wasn't a big, as big of a threat as it definitely has been the last few years. COVID's played a huge role. There's a lot more opportunity now, like Penny said, when people working from home. It's just, you're opening yourself up to more vulnerabilities, and cyber policies like the hackers have been getting more sophisticated in how they respond to it. So I'm just going to go through a few of these slides with you. Some more stats, like Penny said, the hacks are targeting small to mid-sized businesses. And actually our IT guy had a really great analogy. And what he said was, you're not like, why the small, medium businesses? They're just easier targets. And how he put it is, it's like people going through car doors at night in town. We know everyone, whether you know that they've tried to get in your car or not, most of the time, most nights, they are trying to get in your car. So when it's unlocked, they are getting in. And that's exactly what these hackers are looking for, is ways to get into the system. So that's a very good analogy, I think. 58% of the organizations were targeted by phishing. And then again, we've already heard that phishing is number one. They're getting a lot more sophisticated by how they're trying to trick you, right? So a lot of people, including us, we have all of our personal staff information up on the website, and we want to do that to have that personal touch, but it's allowing the hackers to have a more direct line at who is the CFO, who's the president, who's in charge of accounting. One claim example we've had, and this is a very sophisticated one, is a company on the West Coast. Their CEO was going on a cross-country business trip, and it was all over social media, so people understood this. So while he was in the air, someone emailed the accounting department and said, "We need this transferred," pretending it was him. And by the time he got off the plane, the money had already left. So there's a perfect example of them getting a lot more sophisticated than the prince or your uncle's left you $1 million. So again, as people are getting more sophisticated, your defense has to be a lot more sophisticated. And a lot of it has to do with training your staff. So that's a big thing. Like Penny said, it's, that one staff let someone in and they don't have to bypass any systems, right? The staff has let them in. So 30% of Canadian companies are experiencing up to 20 cyber attacks every year. So it's not just the one and done, and you have to remain vigilant. So this is a big thing we get all the time is, my IT department is confident about our cybersecurity. Why do I need a cyber insurance? So again, this is something that, we hear a lot, but it's nothing against the IT department itself. It's, what other protocols are in place? How are the staff trained? How is staff onboarded in to protect against these situations? So again, it's nothing against the IT department. It's something that you have to be aware of. And like I said, the insurance policy is a safety net. Hopefully you never need it, but it's there if something does go wrong. All right, sorry. And this is a big one, and Michael touched on it, is what's the cost of the attack? So again, it's not even as much as what data did they get, but what happens if you're down? If you're down for an hour, okay, you can probably sustain that. If you're down for a day, things might be a little bit hectic, but you can probably rebound. What happens if you're down for a week? Then what happens? If you have no one to help with this breach, if you don't have the telecos or even the cyber insurance policy people to help you, what happens? How do you get that back? How do you get the lost programs, lost work, everything like that? That's where it really comes in. And a lot of these policies will respond with responding to pay for downtime. Again, lost productivity, damage to brand. That's a big one. What does that do to your reputation? A lot of these policies will respond with pay for a PR firm to help manage the brand damage. We've seen these big companies that get hit. Like, think of the millions and millions they have to spend to repair that brand. So cyber insurance is an insurance product that's intended to protect business and individuals from internet-based risks. So a big thing we see too is what exactly will the policy respond to? And not all policies are the same. And this is a big, I want you to take from this. If you already have a cyber policy, or if it's part of your just business insurance, what is it exactly protecting, and what are the limits? What we've been seeing a lot of in the last year and a half now is a lot of the big insurance companies are either stripping the cyber portion of it right out or giving a really low limit. So it may only be a $25,000 limit. And now, like Michael said, even just a ransom attack alone could, the amount of Bitcoins they ask, that could eat up all of your policy limits right there. So again, if you do not have a policy, definitely look into one, and you can get them as standalone policies. And that's something we really recommend now is it's a separate policy dedicated to cyber, and with that, you're going to get the expertise of it, as well as higher limits. You can go up to $1 million, up to actually, $2 million limits now. So there's a wide range, and they are affordable as of right now, as we start seeing more and more claims that will continue to rise. And like I said, more of these companies are just stripping it right out. And again, so there's some of the information right there. Again, yeah, know the coverage before an attack. That's a big thing, not after attack. So try to be prepared, ask questions, question your broker, question, if you need a quote, go out and ask, what it actually does it cover, because then there's so many aspects to it. So two components, first party coverages and third party coverages. So that's important to understand. So the first party coverage will cover anything that happens to you. So there could be hard costs, right, to have to repair servers or, the ransom attack itself. Now, third party coverages are your clients, right? So if you've breached their data or let someone else in through your system, that's where, they'll come back and, sue you and say you were responsible for it. So you got to make sure that you have both first party and third party coverages. That's really important. And a lot of the basic policies right now are only going to cover you for first party coverages. And I don't really need to probably go through all the actual types of attacks again. And I think Penny and Michael did a good job of that. We do see, ransomware attacks are still obviously big, but they're usually getting in through a phishing. Another big one we've been seeing too is theft, right? So they're just either tricking you or stealing e-transfers and things like that. So that's something that you definitely really want to keep an eye on and see what different types of attacks are out there and how you can protect yourself against them, through systems, like Teleco offers. And again, training the staff is a big one to notice these things. So I did want to leave an example of an actual data. This is an actual claim situation and how it was covered by the policy. So this was a small fast food chain in Southern Ontario. Received a common point of purchase notice from Visa and MasterCard, so they thought it was legit. Something came into their system. They noticed something obviously was off, and there was some red flags. So forensic assessment determined that approximately 6,000 cards were compromised. And like Penny said, as part of PIPEDA now is you have to inform people when their data is compromised, whether it's any personal information. Obviously, credit card one would be a big one. So the cost exceeded $30,000 for legal, forensics, and call center services. Part of the call center services was informing people. And I'm sure there was some PR as part of that. So all costs were covered by their cyber policy. So again, you can have all the checks and balances, and if something happens, you still need to respond to it. So it's either coming out of your pocket or, hopefully an insurance policy. So we're back to what Michael was talking about is the cost of a breach. So one of the, as of 2020, they determined an average cost of a customer's record is $150. So per customer, the cost of, their record being out there would cost, you $150 to basically rectify it. So how many customers, data points do you have? If you have 1,000 customer records, that's going to be about $150,000 cost. And again, some of the direct costs are obviously fixing the problem, legal and regulatory fees and penalties, and wasted company time. One of the big things with having a cyber policy to respond as well, they will go in with their experts and have them assess it and do a forensic report and see what happened, and then also to see what you need to do to protect it. Great quote from Warren Buffett here. It takes 20 years to build a reputation and 5 minutes to ruin it, right? So. And we've been seeing again as small little businesses that this is something that can, put them on their knees and put them out of business, unfortunately. So that's something we definitely don't want to see. Yeah, and so again, I think I would rather open it up to some questions. If you guys have questions specifically on insurance policies or your own, or what to look for in a policy, I think at this point, Penny, just because of time, I'd like to open it up, and if you want to go back and see if there are any questions.
Absolutely. Yeah. Thanks, Ryan. That was great. So one question that did come in earlier when Michael was speaking was, I know I need to train my employees on cybersecurity, but where do I start? And that's a great question. So definitely lead by example. I would make sure that you are doing the things that we talked about, using a password manager, making sure all your passwords are secure and unique, turning on that 2FA. There are cybersecurity training packages. We offer them where we can send out specific training modules to your team. You can monitor that to see who's taken them, who hasn't taken them. We can structure it. So if you're more of a healthcare institution or a banking institution, that training can be focused towards that. You also want to really make sure that you're focusing on new employees that you're onboarding, because certain employees are going to be targeted more than others. I do get a report every Monday on the phishing emails that are stopped on our network, and it also tells me the top employees that have gotten phished. And I onboarded a new invoicing clerk. We have a huge onboarding policy or procedures that we go through. And part of it is cybersecurity, but not the first week of joining our team. And when I got that email on the Monday that that individual was second top person in our organization that had been phished that week, guess what? I grabbed her really quickly and talked to her about phishing and cybersecurity and what our policies were. So, it's important to also incorporate training in terms of a phishing simulator. So not only are you training your employees, but you're also sending them phishing simulations to see if they click on it. And if they do click on it, you're alerted, and then you can go to that employee and say, hey, you know what, this was a phishing simulator. Next time, this is what you need to look for. And it will also take them into further training once they do click on it, so they know that it's a test environment. And we still do that with our team here. And I can customize those phishing simulators to make it look like it's coming from me or coming from HR. So we can get really tricky with it. But it's really that vigilance of getting that information out there and attending things like this. The knowledge is power. So the more that you know, the more that you can defend. And it's just very simple that way. So try to learn as much as you can and lead by example. So wonderful question. Another question that got sent to me was, I think, towards you, Ryan. So I have an attack. Or is my first call to you, or do I call my IT provider? How do I handle it?
I mean, that's a great question. If you do have a cyber policy in place, I would say make that your first call. One of the companies we use, they have a war room, and they're called Hackbusters, actually. And you know what? They'll definitely tell you the right steps to how to start the claim and to what to do. I mean, your IT people or IT providers should be involved as well. It's funny, we had one client that went through the steps and went through the motions, and then one of the questions, I think it was about 2 weeks later, someone said, did you actually call the police even? And then we're like, they said, well, no, I didn't even really think of that. And at that point they did contact the RCMP, and they're like, there's nothing really we can do. But it's crazy to think of how this crime has evolved, and it's so hard to catch the perpetrators that a policy needs to be in place so that the steps are there to respond. But yeah, I would definitely, if you have a policy, make that your first call to your cyber insurance broker or your insurance broker.
I also add that everybody in the team needs to know that you have a policy. Because we do incident response work, and we're brought in when people have had an incident, which is maybe a compromise, maybe it's not. We're constantly asking them the question, do you have a cybersecurity policy? And quite often we're getting the I don't know. So it's not just important for the executives of the company to know the IT organization that's supporting you or your full-time IT person. They also have to know that you have this type of policy in place, and they need to know where it is, how to get a hold of it, and who to call. Because if the CEO is the only one who knows, and he or she is out sick, on vacation, unreachable, on a plane, you don't want to slow the progress down of what needs to be done, because these things need timely action. And so it needs to be a boardroom discussion and not something that's held within one or two people's hands.
That's a great point, Michael. Yeah. One of the big things we're seeing in the industry right now is there's a lot of push and pull from, the companies that whether they should be paying ransom attacks or not. It hasn't came to North America yet as much as they're going to continue to pay them. But I mean, it's one of those things that, if they know they're paying, well, then they're going to keep going after people. But some of these businesses, they have no choice. If they don't have proper backups, if they don't pay, they put themselves out of business. So it's one of those things that, they're almost their hands forced to pay. So it's really an unfortunate thing. But I use the analogy that, if a bunch of buildings keep burning down, like, are they going to stop insuring buildings for fire? No, that's not going to happen, right? So it's a very hot topic right now in the industry of how to respond. And what a big thing, what some of these standalone policies are doing now is they're using more risk mitigation factors, right? So even like Michael said, to get those higher limits, they're asking you for a lot of check, some good checklist. What is your antivirus procedure? What is your data, backup plan? So they're trying to get you to think basically they don't want to pay out these policies either, or have to pay them out. So, there's even some that do give some basic, staff training, some modulars, online modulars for staff to use. So they are trying to do everything to mitigate this risk and not be paying out. So, but as things get more sophisticated, you're going to have to stay on top of that.
Okay, great. Two more questions. So one came through the question, one came through chat. One question is, people used to say Apple products are not easy to hack and therefore are safer. Don't have to worry about viruses, etc. Do you think this is still true? Michael?
No, it's not true. I mean, so there are some thoughts behind the Apple operating system being a Unix-based operating system that it is a little bit more secure. I don't know that that's true. And the reason that maybe you hear that a little bit more often is because if you look at Workplace America or Workplace Canada, you look at Workplace anywhere, 90% of the workplace runs on a Windows operating system. So if I'm a bad guy and I'm going to launch an attack, well, am I going to go after 10% or 90%? Well, obviously I'm going after the 90% because I want the biggest return because I'm lazy. So no, I don't think so. I mean, like you hear people talking about the difference between Android and Apple in the phones. And, one of the reasons that Apples don't get it as much as Android isn't because of the operating system on the phone. It's the difference between the marketplace and the Apple store. There's not as much vetting that goes on in the Google marketplace. And so people slip things in there. Where in the Apple store, it's just vetted harder, but it doesn't mean that they've never gotten a ransomware, they've never had a problem. You still need antivirus. You still need patch management. There was a month, maybe last year, I don't remember if it was this year or last year, but there was a month where Apple released more security patches that month than Microsoft did. So obviously that proves that they are as susceptible. It's just not a true statement.
Great answer. And so the last question that came to me through the chat was, I'm officially afraid. Where do I start this process of fixing my cybersecurity? I guess I can answer that, and you guys can add anything to it too. I would start talking to your IT provider or your IT department. You can make it simple. You can download that 15 checklist to start the conversation and say, this is where we are, this is where we need to be. Consider all three pillars of your technology, your policies and procedures, and your humans. And you're not going to be able to do everything right out of the gate, but at least you can recognize where your gaps are. Email, phishing, that's a high area that needs to be secure. So you can start there and just put a plan in place. I mean, if you put a plan in place and you put it over 1 year, over 2 year, you talk to your IT people or your MSP, you meet quarterly with your business reviews. There's lots of things that you can put in place to help you. And so you're not alone. So we do free network assessments for clients. So if you're new and you're not aware of Teleco, we can come in and do a network assessment. We also offer free 60 days on our cybersecurity awareness training. So you can try out the videos, you can try out a phishing simulator. Maybe you think, you know what, my staff's really great, no one's going to click on it. Well, we can give it a shot and see, and we can send them a fake phishing email and see who clicks. I think you'll be very surprised on how many people will click. So you just need to start somewhere. And so that checklist is a really good place to start by just having the conversation. And of course, check on your insurance and make sure that, if something were to happen, it's always good to plan for the worst. That's what when I was looking at something, I'm like, well, what's the worst case scenario and how would we handle that? And plan for that. And then that way you're going to be ahead of the game. So hopefully that answers your question. If there's anything, Michael or Ryan, you'd like to add.
Yeah, I would just say planning's a key for sure. I mean, and some of these cyber policies, depending on the size of the business, can start at, an affordable like $300-400. So I mean, it's not, compared to, some of your other business costs, I think it's a really good security net. So I mean, yeah, don't be, again, we're giving worst case scenarios and it is scary, but with not having a plan, it is going to happen. And unfortunately, we hear it all the time, whether it, how you respond to it and how you've done planning and backup. I mean, it doesn't have to be detrimental. I mean, it could be just a, small expense. But I mean, yeah, it's not kind of if, it's when nowadays.
This is slow and steady wins the race. There's no sprint. There's no fast way to get there. This is just continue to go one step in front of the next and keep moving it forward. And, that's how you're going to win this race.
Absolutely. Well, thank you. Thank you very much, everybody, for attending. I hope you got something out of it. And if you even walk away from this webinar with learning one thing that you can implement in your business today to protect yourself or even just yourself personally, then, we're really happy about that. So any questions or anything at all, don't hesitate to reach out to me. Thank you, Michael. Thank you, Ryan, for your input today. And I wish you all a good rest of the day. Thank you.
Take care,
Have a great one. Thank you.
Thanks, everyone. Bye-bye.